The news that has recently emerged is sending ripples of shock, confusion, and deep anxiety throughout the United Kingdom, particularly among pensioners, because what many assumed was a stable and predictable aspect of their retirement is now being placed under scrutiny in a way that feels both unfair and unsettling. And the central issue here is the confirmation from HMRC that beginning in 2025 a brand new £10,000 savings rule will take effect, a regulation that may at first glance appear minor, even technical, yet on closer inspection reveals itself to be something with enormous consequences for ordinary people who worked hard all their lives, saved cautiously, and thought they were being responsible by setting aside money for emergencies, for rainy days, for peace of mind, only to now be told that their carefulness could cost them the very benefits and financial support they depend on to survive. And that is why this news has landed like a thunderclap, because for decades pensioners were advised to save, to live within their means, to avoid wastefulness, and to keep a little cushion for the unexpected. But with this change the government is essentially penalizing the very behavior it once encouraged, creating an atmosphere of worry and mistrust that is spreading across households, communities, and families. Imagine working 40 or 50 years, contributing to the system, paying taxes, scrimping and saving, and finally reaching retirement with perhaps £11,000 or £12,000 in a savings account, which in today's economy is not much at all, certainly not enough to buy luxury or security for decades, and then being told that because you crossed the £10,000 threshold you could now lose pension credit, face stricter assessments, or see your financial support reduced, an outcome that feels both harsh and disconnected from reality, because anyone who lives in modern Britain knows that £10,000 is not a fortune, not even close. In fact, in many areas it would barely cover a year's rent or a few large household repairs, and yet under this new system that modest sum is treated almost like a sign of wealth, a dividing line that separates those who will receive full benefits from those who will not, and the more you think about it the more absurd it seems. Pensioners are understandably outraged, calling the rule shocking, unfair, punitive, and completely out of touch with what life is really like for older people today, because as costs climb higher every month, energy bills, groceries, transport, council tax, retirees are already struggling just to keep their heads above water, and for the government to impose yet another burden at precisely this moment feels cruel, as if punishing them for doing the right thing. Experts are warning that pensioners need to take this very seriously, to review their savings now, to understand exactly what is coming, because when 2025 arrives it may be too late to adjust, and that sense of urgency is adding even more pressure to lives already under stress. This story is not just another headline, it is a wake-up call, a moment that forces people to ask hard questions about what it means to be financially secure in retirement, what fairness really looks like in public policy, and whether pensioners are being respected or sidelined. Let's think about the numbers again, because they are stark. £10,000 divided across 10 years of retirement equals less than £100 a month, hardly enough to make anyone feel wealthy, yet under this rule it becomes a trigger point for losing support, and that is why so many pensioners are furious, because they see it as punishing responsibility rather than rewarding it. When you listen to the stories pensioners tell, you hear the same themes repeated over and over, how they built up their savings slowly, bit by bit, sometimes putting away a couple of pounds each week, sometimes keeping redundancy pay safe rather than spending it, sometimes saving birthday or Christmas money, and over decades those tiny amounts accumulated into a modest sum that was never intended to buy luxury but simply to provide a safety net for broken boilers, leaky roofs, funeral costs, or medical needs. And now that safety net is under threat of becoming a liability, the very thing that makes them lose what they most depend on, a cruel twist of irony that leaves many feeling betrayed. And it is not just about numbers on a page, it is about people, parents, grandparents, neighbors, friends, the very people who live on our streets, who shop in the same stores, who queue at the same pharmacies, who already feel the pinch every time they pay for heating or watch their grocery bill climb higher. And for them having a little money tucked away was never about living large, it was about security, dignity, peace of mind, and to strip that away by linking it to benefit entitlement feels like stripping away dignity itself. The government argues this is about fairness, about ensuring benefits go to those who need them most, but the question is who decides what need really means, and how can anyone seriously claim that £10,000 in savings places someone in a comfortable position when inflation eats away at that value so rapidly that it is shrinking year by year, so that what might cover essentials today will not cover them tomorrow, And locking the threshold at that level without adjustment for inflation only traps more and more pensioners over time, tightening the noose slowly as costs rise. Consider 2. The lack of clarity about how this rule will even be applied. Will HMRC be combing through accounts, tracking every deposit, every transfer, every withdrawal? Will pensioners feel as though they are under surveillance, their financial privacy invaded, their dignity undermined? And how will older people already anxious about online security, about scams, about digital banking, cope with the idea that the government itself is monitoring them with suspicion? It feels less like a safety net and more like a trap, and that is why the anger is spreading, because people sense not only the financial threat but the disrespect that comes with it. Add to this the wider context, debates over the triple lock, questions about winter fuel payments, changes to bus passes and TV licenses, and you see a pattern, a slow chipping away of every small support that once made retirement manageable, until pensioners are left feeling that the ground beneath them is crumbling. Imagine a widowed pensioner in Manchester with £11,200 in savings, money partly from her husband's life insurance, partly from years of careful saving, who relies on pension credit for her rent and groceries, suddenly finding that because she has £1,200 more than the threshold her entitlement is cut, a change that pushes her from stability into hardship. Or think of a couple in Glasgow who scraped together £15,000 after selling their car, only to discover that this too will reduce the support they counted on, even though they saved that money to cover medical care and emergencies. And when you multiply these examples by tens of thousands across the country, you begin to see why people are calling this rule disastrous, because it creates a savings penalty that discourages responsibility and sends the terrible message that saving is dangerous, that while ordinary pensioners are being examined for having £10,000 or £15,000 saved, the wealthiest people in the country have millions sheltered in tax loopholes, offshore accounts, and complex investments, far beyond the reach of HMRC scrutiny. And once again the rules seem stacked against the average person while the privileged escape untouched, fueling anger and resentment. Can pensioners fight back? Can the rule be changed before it comes into force? Perhaps, because history shows that when older people raise their voices, over TV licenses, winter fuel payments, bus passes, governments sometimes listen, because politicians know older voters are a powerful force. And if enough people speak up, write letters, share concerns, apply pressure, there is a chance for change. But silence will allow the rule to slip quietly into place, harder to undo later, and that is why it matters that pensioners stay informed, talk to family, raise their voices now. For the pensioner in Birmingham with £10,500 in savings or the couple in Glasgow with £15,000, this is not a minor detail. It is the line between security and hardship, between living with dignity and living with fear, and for society as a whole it raises urgent questions about fairness, about values, about how we treat those who contributed for decades. And as we move closer to 2025, the pressure only grows, with months ticking away, leaving pensioners to make difficult decisions, to weigh whether to spend down savings, to shift money, to sacrifice peace of mind, all choices no one should face in retirement. And yet here they are forced into a cat-and-mouse game with government departments when they should be resting after years of labor. The cruel irony is that instead of rewarding carefulness, the system penalizes it, and instead of building trust it erodes it, and that is why this issue is not just financial but moral, because pensioners deserve dignity, respect, and security, not suspicion, penalties, and stress, and unless something changes soon, the £10,000 savings rule risks becoming a symbol of betrayal, a policy that tells people saving is wrong, responsibility is pointless, and security is unattainable, when in fact, those are the very values society should protect.